Also from me, very warm welcome to everybody. And thank you for joining us this evening for the wisdom of Zarathustra and the Zend Avesta, which comes from the most ancient times to us. The Zend Avesta is the first encyclopedia of mankind, dating much farther back in recorded history than ancient Egypt, China, or India. It is itself a recapitulation of previous ancient traditions, lost in the mist of history, wrote Dr. Edmund Bodo-Ceceli in his several books dealing with the Zend Avesta. Professor Ceceli held a professorship in philosophy and experimental psychology at the University of Cluj in Romania, and was a well-known philologist in Sanskrit, Aramaic, Greek, and Latin, and spoke 10 modern languages as well. He is most famous for his discovery of an original Aramaic text of the Essen Gospel of Peace in the Library of the Vatican. He also translated some texts of the Dead Sea Scrolls, as well as the Zend Avesta of Zarathustra. Like Dr. Ceceli, Madame Blavatsky confirms that the Zend Avesta of Zarathustra, or Zoroaster, the Greek version of the name Zarathustra, is one of the oldest scriptures in human history. Avesta means the law, and Zend stands for commentaries. The appellation of Zoroaster is given to the teachers of Zoroastrianism at different epochs in time, says HPB. Due to some changes of language in the great number of nations who were converted to the sun worship, Zoroaster cannot be just a name, but is a generic term. For example, a guru is a spiritual teacher in Sanskrit, and as Zoroaster means in the same language he who worships the sun, the word Zoroaster means spiritual teacher of sun worship, very closely resembling the name of the founder of this religion, which became gradually transformed into Zoroaster. Zoroastrianism is variously called Mazdanism, Parseeism, or fire worship. And the Zend Avesta is of the same value to Zoroastrianism as the Vedas are to Brahmanism. Most important to know and emphasize is the fact since Zarathustra or Zoroaster is a generic term, for that reason it is quite impossible to determine the age of the last Zoroaster. Xanthos of Lydia, the earliest Greek writer who mentions this great lawgiver and religious reformer, places him 600 years before the Trojan War. But where's the historian who cannot tell when the latter really took place, asked Madame Blavatsky. The main source of our knowledge about the Trojan War is Homer's Iliad, written sometime in the 8th century BC. The Greek imagine it to have happened sometime before the 13th century BC. Aristotle assigns Zoroaster a date of no less than 6,000 years before the days of Plato, and that it was not one to make a statement without a good reason, says HBB. Orossos, a Hellenistic area Babylonian writer and astronomer who wrote at the beginning of the 3rd century BC, makes Zoroaster a king of Babylon, some 2,200 years. But HBB mistrusts this date, because its manuscript passed through the hand of Eusebius. Professor Ceceli, like Madame Blavatsky, exposed him as one of the greatest manipulators of documents and fraud. In her collected writings, HBB calls Eusebius of Caesarea king of falsifiers. And in collected writings 5, that is since accused in history of perverting every Egyptian chronological table for the sake of synchronism. Martin Hauck, a German Orientalist, places Zoroaster to at least 1,000 years BC. And Baron von Bunsem, a German diplomat and scholar, wrote, that Zarathustra lived under the king Vistaspa, about 3000 years BC, describing him as one of the mightiest intellects and one of the greatest men of all time. This is very well demonstrated in one of the oldest Parsi legends about Zoroaster, the Legends of the Grain. According to Dr. Chikali, the legend of the grain is the most authentic presentation of the great Zoroastrian teachings in the most vivid way, and agrees with Baron von Bunsen's account that Zarathustra lived at about 3000 BC, at the time of the king Vistaspa. The legend of the grain tells us the story of Vistaspa, king of Persia, when he was returning from a victorious campaign, passing close by where Zoroaster lived and taught his disciples. He decided to visit the famous man whose name was known to every Persian, to see if he could answer all those difficult questions which the wise men in his palace were unable to explain. When they approached the dwelling of Zoroaster, they saw him in a group of disciples, busy working in an orchard, and the master seemed to be instructing them. At the king's approach, the disciples withdrew, and he asked Zoroaster if he could explain to him the laws of nature and the universe. If he was really as wise as the people of his kingdom declare, this would doubtlessly not take very long, because he had not much time, being on his way home from a war, and that important matters of state were waiting for him in his palace. Looking at the king for a moment, Zoroaster took a grain of wheat from the earth, gave it to him, and said, "In this small grain of wheat are contained all the laws of the universe and the forces of nature." The king was very astonished by this answer and did not understand. And when he saw the smiles on the faces of those around him, he became very angry and threw the grain upon the ground, thinking that he was being mocked. To Zoroaster he said, "I believed that you were a wise man and a great philosopher, but now I see that you are hiding your ignorance behind the cloak of exaggeration. I was foolish to wait my time by coming to see you." Angrily the king turned and rode on to his palace. Zoroaster picked up the grain and told his disciples that he would keep this grain of wheat, because it would one day be needed by the king to be his teacher. As the years passed, the king was successful as a ruler and warrior, living a life of luxury and apparent contentment in his palace. But at night strange thoughts came into his mind and troubled him very much. Questions like, "I live in luxury and abundance, but not far away are multitudes of people who live in misery, being cold and hungry. Why am I king and have power over all these men and all things in my empire? What will happen when I die? If I pass to another life, shall I still be myself, or shall I become someone entirely different? What happened before I came into this life? Did I live before in this country or in another? Or was I born for the first time? How did life and what begin, and what was there before the creation of the universe and life appeared? Was the universe created by someone, and was this someone God? But then who created God? What is time? Does eternity exist? If so, how can we conceive of it? No one could answer these questions in the king's palace. But meanwhile the fame of Zoroaster grew, and many disciples were coming from faraway lands to hear his teachings. So the king put away his pride, dispatched a great caravan with treasures to Zoroaster and an invitation to come to his palace, with a message that he was a changed man now and regretted the impatience in his youth. He still wanted to know about the laws of the universe and the forces of nature, If Zoroaster was not able to come to his palace himself, he begged him to send one of his best disciples to teach him. When the messengers returned, they told him that they had found Zoroaster, that he sent him greetings but returned the treasures, because they were of no use to him as a gardener. He kept the wrappings, though, as they would be useful to protect his trees and plants against a cold winter. Moreover, Zoroaster sent the king a gift, wrapped in a leaf, and that the messengers should tell him that this was a teacher who could tell him everything about the forces of nature and the universe, and that it had once been his own teacher. The king opened the gift and found the same grain of wheat Zoroaster had given him before. He was very perturbed by the wheat and thought there must be something mysterious and magical about it. He put it in a golden box, expecting a miracle to happen, such as turning of the grain into something or someone that would teach him all he wished to know. But months went by and nothing happened. The king lost his patience and thought Zoroaster had deceived him again, or does not know the answers to all his questions. So the king sent another caravan with all the treasures to the great Indian philosopher called Zend Avesta, to whom came disciples from all parts of the world. After several months, the messengers returned from India and announced that the philosopher had agreed to teach the king and would soon arrive. Festivities were ordered for his arrival, and the king thanked him for coming from such a far country. But Zend Avesta said to him that the main reason for coming to his country was to meet the great Zoroaster, and that he was quite surprised to hear about his need for him when he was so near to one who could doubtlessly tell him more than he could do. Then the king showed him the golden box containing the grain of meat and said that he had asked Zoroaster to teach him, but the grain was all he was given to be his teacher, which he found quite ridiculous. Zend Avesta looked at the grain for a long time. Silence fell over the palace while he meditated. And then he told the king that he did not regret his long journey of many months, for now he knew that Zoroaster was indeed the great teacher he was looking for. This tiny grain of wheat could indeed teach us the laws of the universe and the forces of nature, for it contains them within itself. Even as you must not keep the grain of wheat in this golden box, so you yourself must not stay in the luxurious palace to find the answers to all your questions, he said. If you plant a little grain in the earth where it belongs with the soil, the rain, the air, the sunshine and the light of the moon and the stars, then like the universe itself, it will begin to grow, bigger and bigger. Likewise, you will grow in knowledge and understanding if you leave your palace and go into your garden, where you will be close to all the forces in nature and the universe, to the sum total of all things. Just as inexhaustible sources of energy are ever flowing towards the grain in the earth, so will they flow towards you until you become one with nature and the organic universe. If you watch the growth of the seed of grain, you will find that there is an indestructible and mysterious power in it, the power of life. You will see that the grain disappears and is replaced by a plant, which will triumph over all obstacles and opposition, like gravity, growing higher and higher because it has life within it. At the moment when the grain sprouts, there is victory over death at every instant of the plant's growth towards the sun in the face of great opposing forces. That is all true, said the king. Yet in the end the plant will wither and die as well, being dissolved in the earth. But not until it has done an act of creation and has turned itself into hundreds of grains, each like the first, said the philosopher. The tiny grain disappeared as it grew into a plant. And you too, as you grow, must turn yourself into something and something different, but only to return in a greater form. Life always creates more life, and truth more abundant truth. The grain teaches you that everything is in movement and is constantly changing and growing, that life and all things are the result of struggle between two opposing forces. Your garden, the sun and the sky, with all the stars will teach you many more truths of this kind. We should be thankful to Zoroaster to having sent us a little grain. I suppose that we have a rest now. Tomorrow we will journey to Zoroaster himself, that he may teach us more of all these things, and we will both benefit from his wisdom. The king was very moved by Chengrigaccha's word and readily agreed to his suggestion. When they came to the garden of Zoroaster, they understood immediately the methods by which he taught his disciples. His only book was a book of nature. They learned another great truth from him, namely that life, work, study, and leisure are one and the same thing. That the right way to live is a simple natural life within which individual growth is a single total dynamism. They spend a year in the garden learning to read the laws of existence and life from the vast book of nature. At the end of the time, the king asked Zoroaster to set out systematically the essence of his great teachings before he went back to his own city. Zoroaster did so, and the result was a sacred book of the Zend Avesta, which by the king's command became the official religion of the Persian people. Meanwhile, Chengrigaccha went back to India, and there, being a poet as well as a philosopher, summed up all he had learned in Zoroaster's garden in the beautiful and simplicity. But when, like all imperial powers, the Persians departed from this simple natural life, becoming lazy from excess of wealth and might, they fell before the arms of other rising warrior nations. Such is a cycle constantly recurring throughout universal history. The fate of an individual or that of a nation will always be determined by the degree of his or its harmony with the forces of nature and the laws of life in the universe. HBB pointed out that the occult records claim to have the correct dates of 13 Zoroasters mentioned in the Devastan, a religion of ancient Persia, that the hierarchy began with the divine Zarathustra of the Vendidat, the first book of the Zend Avesta, and ended with a great but mortal man bearing the title, which is now lost in history. Professor Shekeli gives us a very comprehensive analysis of the essential teachings of the Avesta, and emphasizes when we speak of the religion of Zoroaster, it is used in its original sense, derived from the Latin word religio or religere, which means to bind or connect. It connects every manifestation of man with all the forces in nature and the cosmos. This is reflected in the true meaning of Avesta in the ancient Zend language. It means the book of life. The Avesta consists of separate parts, each being connected with a different cult. Etymologically, the word cult comes from the root of the words culture and to cultivate, representing the core system of beliefs and activities at the basis of any culture. Thus, every human being belongs to a cult in its own and most general sense, because everyone belongs to the culture where he is born, conveyed by the language they speak and the habits they have formed. The sum of the 9 cults of the Avesta make up its encyclopedic system, which are as follows. The first cult is the cult of the mother of life. The modern equivalent of mother of life would be the soil, or more exactly the topsoil. According to Zoroaster, the basis of all manifestation of life on this planet is the topsoil, the sustenance of the vegetable and animal kingdom, as well as that of humanity, and all civilization is based upon and depends upon these few inches of earth. This thin layer gives the necessary food for all. According to Zoroaster, there is something mysterious in this life-giving property of soil, from which everything comes and to which everything returns. It is a wheel of life for that great universal process whereby the various vital energies travel from the soil through the vegetable and animal kingdoms and then back to the soil. The second cult is the cult of the water of life. Zoroaster regarded water and soil as equally important as a bearer of life, since the soil only yields life in the presence of moisture, the mysterious element which enables soil to produce the initial phase of every manifestation of life. According to Zoroaster, it is moisture which is found alike in the seed-sprouting rain as in the sperm of animals. It is the same element in underground streams, creeks, rivers, and oceans. And it is the rain that maintains the life of all plants, animals, and men. The process is reproduced in a miniature scale in the circulation of the blood in every organism. The third cult is the father of life, or the sun. According to Zoroaster, there is a certain natural force, the sun or the solar energy, without which life on this planet will be impossible. It is by virtue of the sun's rays that the manifold and mysterious process of life begins and continues in the various plants and trees. Solar energy not only influences but determines the life of all animals and men. It is the sun that creates a temperature favorable to life. Above and below certain limits of temperature or manifestation of life on Earth will inevitably be destroyed. Its variation in intensity creates days and nights and the season of the year. The sun is the great force which governs all manifestation of life. It was invoked, honored, and celebrated as a great life-giving element in numerous Avestic hymns. The fourth cult is the breath of life. The breath of life relates to the air, or more specifically to the atmosphere. In Zoroaster's view, the atmosphere is charged with all the vital energies which create and sustain life. In the words of the Avesta, where there is breath, there is life. It is the only region above the surface of this planet that possesses the preconditions of life, the Earth's atmosphere. Above and below this belt, life is impossible. There are numerous passages in the Avesta in which the science of breathing is described, considered by Zoroaster as the greatest source of energy. The description of various breathing techniques is one of the most interesting chapters in the Avesta. These passages were written thousands of years before the different yoga systems and practices appeared in India. Rhythmic breathing calls for fuller inhalation and exhalation than we normally take. The message is of 4 seconds in and 1 second retention, 4 seconds out and 1 second arrestment. At all times there must be no forcing of the breath, and absolute positive relaxation is a priority with only the chest held firm. HBD says as well in her collected writings that the loss of vitality should be made good by standing in the sun, with as little clothing on as possible, breathing deeply and slowly and retaining the breath between each inhalation and exhalation as long as it is convenient. That is not long enough to cause any struggle or gasping. 5 minutes of this should restore the pranic balance. The fifth cult is the cult of the fire of life or vitality. In the Zend Avesta, the fire of life exactly means what we understand by the word vitality. It is very interesting to see how the modern Parsees, the various Greek authors, contemporary philologists and Orientalists have interpreted the cult of the fire of life. The original Avestic significance of this term has escaped them in every instance, says Professor Jegeli, because an important passage in the Avesta declares that we should feed the fire of life every day with the purest ingredients, as it should be done with the fire of the earth as well, feeding it with dry wood and not with rubbish to maintain a pure and smokeless flame. The Greek authors thought that Zoroaster required each believer to continually maintain fire to be fed with special wood. Some Orientalists interpret it as in the same way, and some sects in India always keep such a fire burning. But from the original text of the Avesta, which the latest archaeological discoveries confirm, that by the term fire of life, Zoroaster meant vitality, says Professor Jegeli, and not an exterior fire, that we should nourish the vital process of an organism only with natural foods that are the preconditions of human vitality. In the Avestas, which deals with the fire of life, can be found the basis of medical science laid down thousands of years before the time of Hippocrates, who is usually regarded as the father of medicine. According to Zoroaster, when the organism has consumed unnatural or unwholesome foods which have disturbed its vitality, the best way to re-establish the purity of the fire of life is through fasting, cleansing the system. The sixth cult is the cult of the brother tree. According to Zoroaster, men and trees are brothers and cannot develop fully without one another. He asserts that the tree is the most perfect form of life in the vegetable kingdom, as is the highest degree of evolution attained in the animal kingdom by man. The highest form of food on this planet is the product of trees, the fruits and nuts, and man as the highest form in the animal kingdom should be nourished by such food. The tree is the law of life itself, declares the Avesta, because it is in harmony with all the forces in nature. Besides bringing forth the most perfect food for man, trees maintain the fertility and vitality of the soil, protect the earth from desecration by the sun and wind, preserving the life-giving moisture of the topsoil with their periodic carpet of fallen leaves and fruit, and their roots drain away any excess of humidity. In the hymns of the Avesta, it is a crime to cut down a tree without planting at least 2 others in its place. The seventh cult is the cult of the master of life. The teachings of Zoroaster confirm that man, also as much part of nature as animals and plants, is indeed a much more important part, because nature becomes self-conscious in man. He is not only able to observe the laws of nature and transform this planet in accordance with his laws, but that he represents God or the divine and continues the work of creation according to his needs and his growing understanding of the natural and cosmic laws. Man is provided with a lofty moral code of marvelous simplicity, moral but practical in accord with his creative destiny, represented by the famous sentence, good thoughts, good words, good deeds, regulating the complex relationship between individuals. This moral code is man's title of nobility, to perform his glorious role as the dominant race upon the earth. The eighth cult is the cult of the light of life. According to Zoroaster, our life is not only determined by what we think, say, or do, but also, and in even greater degrees, by the thoughts, words, deeds, and inventions by the long line of our ancestors, representing the sum of all preceding generations, which we call today culture, and which is expressed in the Avesta by the words light of life, which comes to us continually from the most distant ages, providing us with the total wisdom and experiences of previous generations, building on what they have already proved right, honoring the great masterpieces of all ages and of all natures by studying and meditating upon them and implementing them into our lives as individuals and of society. The intolerance characteristic of many other religions of antiquity is not found to be in the teachings of Zoroaster. Most of the passages concerning the cult of life and life was found in the book of the Avestas entitled Whisperet, which is the exact Zend equivalent of the word omniscience. And finally, the ninth cult, the cult of eternal life. The ninth and last cult of the Avestas is concerned with the stars and eternal life. According to Zoroaster, life is not exclusive privilege of this planet, but that there are innumerable planets and solar systems in infinite cosmic space, existing in a wide range of forms. That life is a form of cosmic energy which will always appear wherever favorable conditions exist. Life is a cosmic function, an inherent quality of the universe. And there is in boundless space and time a universal solidarity, connecting all forms of life and whatever planets and solar system may appear and disappear, but life is as eternal as space itself. Zarathustra draws inspiration from his intimate knowledge of nature to produce poetic images and analogies. The early heliolithic teachings were written only in pictographs to explain the unexplainable, symbolized by Asha, which means the cosmic order. The ancient Sumerians, for example, followers of Zarathustra, were convinced that we do not live in a capricious universe, that everything will be in balance and harmony to the extent that we cooperate and strengthen this balance and harmony, because we form an intrinsic part of Asha, or the cosmic order. As we have heard before, the Zend Avesta is a recapitulation of previous ancient traditions, lost in the mist of history, and that those early heliolithic pictographs and ideograms often represent a more intensive reality than abstract words formed from alphabets. To explain the creation of the universe in a way that would be immediately and instinctively understood, the ancient Sumerians, followers of Zarathustra, used these pictographs to explain the unexplainable, Asha, or the cosmic order. For example, everything started from a point which contains within itself an infinitesimal number of points or universes within themselves, representing the infinity of the creative energy. There was initially a cosmic explosion of a point, and this point created time, force, space, and matter, symbolized in these pictograms. In our collected writings, we can read as well that the mathematical point called the cosmic seed is a monad of Leibniz, which contains the whole universe as the egg on the yolk. This is the first bubble on the surface of boundless homogeneous substance or space. The bubble of differentiation is its incipient stage. It is the beginning of the Orphic or Brahma's egg. Every mathematical point in boundless space can really be looked upon as a monad, because the universe is embodied consciousness collectively and embodied consciousness or monads individually. Light is the first begotten and the first emanation of the Supreme, and light is life. Both are electricity. The life principle, the anima mundi pervading the universe, the electric vivifier of all things. Within its beams lie the beginning of all physical and chemical action, and of all cosmic and spiritual phenomena. It vitalizes and disorganizes. It gives life and produces death. And from its primordial point gradually emerged into existence the myriads of worlds, visible and invisible, celestial bodies. It was at the ray of the first mother, one in three, that God, according to Plato, lighted the fire which we now call the sun, and which is not the cause of either light or heat, but merely a focus, or as we might say, a lens, by which the rays of the primordial light become materialized, are concentrated upon our solar system, and produce all the correlation of forces. Dr. Timely was professor of chemistry at the Allahabad University in India, and an influential scholar in the fields of yoga and Indian philosophy. He was also a leader of the Theosophical Society. Dr. Timely authored a number of books on Eastern philosophy, including a modern interpretation of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. In his book Science and Occultism, he points out as well that according to occultism, discontinuity is introduced in the realm of space by bringing to existence an infinite number of points, each of which serves as a center of separation and distinction from the whole. Since manifestation can take place only through the great point, the precipitation of an infinite number of such points is possible only by the reproduction or proliferation of the great point. As an infinite number of points, when put closely together, can give an illusory impression of a continuous line, which can also be produced by the rapid movement of a point. So an infinite number of points or rapid movements of points can produce by different combinations an illusory impression of objects in a different number of dimensions. Scientific knowledge fully corroborates this occult doctrine, he says. For the apparently solid objects with continuous surfaces are nothing but aggregates of atoms and other subatomic particles, separate from one another by vast distances. So what is the source of this activity? Theosophy explains the scattering process of manifestation and the power behind it like this. From Svabhat, a Sanskrit term for the spirit and essence of cosmic substance, proceeds Fohat, and Foas, an occult Tibetan term for Devi Prakriti or primordial light, is the essence of cosmic electricity. In the universe of manifestation, it is the ever-present electrical energy, the ceaseless destructive and formative power. Fohat scatters himself, said the ancient teachings, by scattering primordial matter into atoms, by infusing energy into them. But in this case, to the commonly known properties of electricity, intelligence must be included. Occultism tells us that every atom, like the monad of Leibniz, is a little universe in itself. Ahura Mazda, the god or creative power of the Zoroastrians and the Parsees, is also symbolized by the sun as being the light of all lights. It is a creative, generative light of the Logos, like Horus in ancient Egypt and Brahma in Hindu philosophy, for example, as the primeval manifestations of the ever-unmanifest principle, Ein Sof, Parabrahm or Zerana Kern, boundless time. Ahura Mazda, or the Lord of Wisdom, the Word or the Logos, is a synthesis of the Upanishads, the creators and destroyers of the creatures of Ahura Mazda, and dual in character. They correspond to the Dhyani Chauhans, The divine intelligence is charged with the supervision of the cosmos, says the sacred doctrine. On the astral or psychic plane, they are the builders and watchers, the first preceptors or teachers of mankind. When mortals have become sufficiently spiritual, says the SD, men will know then that there never was a great world reformer whose name has passed into our generation, who A, was not a direct emanation of the Logos, under whatever name known to us, that is an essential incarnation of one of the seven of the divine spirit who is sevenfold, and B, who had not appeared before during the past cycles. What can Zoroastrianism offer contemporary man? According to Zoroaster, we find two opposing forces in every manifestation of life, whether vegetable, animal, human, collective, earthly, or cosmic, the forces of good and evil. Harmful results will always follow deviation from the good. If, for example, we neglect to cultivate the topsoil and do not return to it all the values we have drawn from it, the soil will be impoverished, plants and animals will suffer deficiency, and we become sick. If we neglect to maintain the right degree of moisture, drought will follow and may lead to famine. If we dwell in places where the rays of the sun cannot reach us, we will become victims of disease due to the lack of the sun's energies and a sufficient supply of vitamins. If we breathe air unfit for human organisms, it will weaken our immune system. If we use inferior foods, our vitality will be impaired. If we cut down our trees without replacing them, deserts will be created and the climates will change for the worse. If we deviate from our natural code of life, good thoughts, good words, good deeds, the loss of our mental, moral, and collective equilibrium will follow. Neglect of the masterpieces of all ages will result in one-sidedness and ignorance. Neglect of the cult of life will prevent us from knowing our place in the universe. In every manifestation of life, we shall find that there is both good and evil, and that we have always to choose between the two, by which we either increase universal harmony or universal discord. We cannot remain neutral. In the symbolic language of the Avestas, you work either with the kingdom of light of Ormuzd or our master, or with the kingdom of darkness, Ahriman. For Ahriman is matter, the begetter of evil, and the destroyer, since matter, eternal per se and indestructible, having to ever change form, destroys the unis, while Ormuzd or spirit, the essence of all manifestation, remains immutable in its abstract unity and as a whole. Ahriman or evil had no beginning, like spirit and matter, which have no beginning either, since matter and spirit are one. The former is the lower, the latter is the higher pole of being, differentiated in degrees, not in the essence. Ahriman will disappear from the face of the universe when creation, or rather matter in its differentiated condition, becomes pure as the first day. When matter gradually purified becomes once more undifferentiated, or returns to its primitive condition in the 7 states of cosmic dissolution. And this takes place periodically at the Mahapralayas, or the universal dissipation of objective matter. Zoroaster's basic attitude is eternal vigilance as a price for vitality, happiness, and wisdom. It is a dynamic attitude which will prevent even the appearance of evil. And evil has crept in, it will fight and destroy it. The Zoroastrians knew that this was a heroic lifetime task, since the forces of evil have great power in ourselves, in society, on the planet, and throughout the universe. But they also knew that this unceasing struggle provided them with a great arsenal of all the sources of energy, harmony, and knowledge to be found in mankind, nature, and the cosmos. And thousands of generations will have passed during this evolutionary process. It will finally result in the complete extinction of evil on this planet. This philosophy is summed up in the well-known lines of the Avesta: evil exists not, only the past. The past is past. The present is a moment. The future is all. One of the fundamental commandments in every divine philosophy is, you shall not kill. And that includes the animal kingdom. It's an unnatural development. Man starts downwards a simple spiritual entity, an unconscious seventh principle, a parabrahm in contradistinction to parabrahm, with the germs of the other six principles lying latent and dormant in him, says Mahatma Gotami. Gathering solidity at every sphere, a sixth principle, and passing through the worlds of effects, and his outward form in the worlds of causes. When he touches our planet, he is but a glorious bunch of light upon a sphere itself, yet pure and undefiled. For mankind and every living thing on it increases in their materiality with the planet. At that stage, our globe is like the head of a newly born baby, soft and with undefined features. And man and Adam, before the breath of life was breathed into his nostrils, for man and our planet's nature, it is the first day. Do not kill is a commandment which we find in all true religions and philosophy. Dr. Karl Anders Scriver was a minister of the Evangelical Lutheran Church. For his doctorate, he wrote a thesis on Sanskrit Vedic literature. He was deeply influenced by the teachings of Gautama Buddha, and a great opponent of Hitler's Nazi regime, became a life member of the British Vegan Society, wrote several books which he partly published with the help of family and friends himself, because they were so disturbing for the established churches that no editor dared to take them on. He wrote that the main problem with the traditional Bible translation is the ignorance of its metaphysical character and symbolism. The book of Genesis should have actually started with what is now chapter 2 and 3, where we are dealing with the Garden of Eden. It is a pre-cosmic stage before materialization of the world, where we find totally different circumstances. Here the development starts from above rather than from below. Human beings are not last but first. Exactly what theosophy teaches us today. Humans are purely spiritual beings. They have no material body yet. They are naked or undressed. Earth is still of subtle material. There are mythical trees like the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the tree of life. Yahweh, the highest deity of the Jewish religious system, puts man into the Garden of Eden to care for it. Man's sole food are the fruits of the trees. Only the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil are forbidden. The secret doctrine confirms that the student must bear in mind that, as Adam Kadmon, the male and female being of Genesis, is no physical man, no physical being, but the host of the Elohim. The animals mentioned in that chapter as created before man in the dead letter text were no animals, but the zodiacal signs and other sidereal bodies. When paradise is lost, we plunge right into chapter 1 of Genesis and into the world of matter, says Dr. Scriver, where not the Lord of the God creates heaven and earth, but the Elohim, the seven creative spirits or forces from the lower centers of consciousness, or Sephiroth in Kabbalistic terms. The animals come first, than human beings already separated into two sexes. But the Elohim are in harmony with the spiritual prototype of man concerning his food. It is a bit coarser than in paradise, including not only fruit, but also green herbs as well as plants and trees that yield seeds. And this vegan food is not only meant for humans, but also for every kind of animal on the planet, the Bible tells us, which is completely overlooked in our modern society. Buddha preached as well that the killing of animals was the greatest sin. In the 5th century BC, he lived with his parents King Suddhodana and Queen Maya in Kapilavastu, which is located in present-day Nepal. When the prince was 29 years old, he left the palace in search for enlightenment. The circumstances that led to it is beautifully described in the poetical verses of The Light of Asia by Sir Edwin Arnold. Gautama's father, the king, wanted to show his son the riches of spring in nature. Everything spoke of peace and plenty, and at first Gautama rejoiced, it was said. But then he looked deeper and saw all the thorns which grew on the rose of life, how hard the peasants were working to earn a living, how every animal ate a smaller one and was eaten in turn by a bigger one, that each slew a slayer and in turn was slain. Life living upon death was a grim conspiracy of mutual murder, a constant war between weak and strong for survival from warm to earth to man. There was no refuge even in water. Gautama was deeply irritated by this insight and overwhelmed by compassion and love for all living things. And he meditated about this deep disease of life for many hours. What was his source, and where could its remedy be found? So vast was his pity that filled him, such wide love for all living things, such passion to heal the pain, that by their stress his princely spirit passed into ecstasy, where the young man attained dhyana, the first step on the path to enlightenment. Help nature and work with her, and nature will regard thee as one of her creators and make obeisance, says the voice of the silence. And she will open wide before thee the portals of her secret chambers. Lay before thy gaze the treasures hidden in the very depths of her pure virgin bosom. Unsullied by the hand of matter, she shows her treasures only to the eye of spirit, the eye which never closes, the eye for which there is no veil in all her kingdoms. I tell you truly, says Jesus as well in the same Gospel of Peace, that the book of nature is a holy scroll. And if you would have the sons of men save themselves and find everlasting life, teach them how once again to reach from the living pages of the earthly mother. Only when he returns to the bosom of his earthly mother will he find everlasting life and the stream of life which will lead to his heavenly Father. For the heavenly Father is the one law. Glorious indeed is the inheritance of the Son of Man. But first he must seek and find peace with his body, his thoughts, his feelings, with all sons of men, with holy knowledge and the kingdom of the earthly mother. He must have peace that is sevenfold before he can know the one peace which surpasses all understanding, even that of the Heavenly Father. And that is the end.